Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Design Recharge. I'm really excited. I'm Diane Gibbs, and I'm so excited to introduce Gigi Rosenberg to you. I have been blown away by her book, which is all noted up and flags everywhere. I'm going to put you a link up in just a minute so that you guys can get it too. But it is like jam-packed and it's easy reading, which might not think that would be easy, but it is. She gives lots of great examples. Anyway, I'm really excited to have everybody. Great to have a lot of people I recognize. So hopefully this will be super helpful. So Gigi, thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome. It's great to be here.
So give us a little bit about your background as an artist and what made you want to write this book.
So I've been writing, I'm a writer, although I know a lot of visual artists, and everyone I grew up with is a visual artist. My parents are and were, professional visual artists my whole growing up. So I guess over the years I started writing grants and applying for grants to support my own writing life. And then I got asked to sit on a panel to judge grants, and I realized, wow, people do not do a good job in general, especially artists, in writing about what they want to do and explaining to a panel why it would be a great thing to fund. So a friend of mine said, you should write a book about this. And I love writing, I love books, and I thought, oh my God, that's my next project. So, boy, it was several years ago now, because the book has been out a couple years. I sat down to basically put together everything I had learned about grant writing, and then interview tons of artists who'd won grants and tons of people who sit on the other side of the table who give money, and really hone it down to what are really the keys to writing a great, winnable grant application. So that's how it all came together.
And so the book actually covers more than just that. There's so many things that I really like about it, and I'm going to talk about them in a little bit. But so talk about some of the mistakes, because I mean that's one of the reasons that you started it, was because of all these. You realized that they weren't doing a good job. So talk about some of the mistakes that many artists make in regards to writing grants, and then well, talk about that, and then I'll ask you the second part of that question.
So the mistakes people make in general is, well, a couple. One is, and this is a really key one, is they don't really say in the first sentence of the grant application, because, for those of you who haven't written grant applications, you have to write at least a paragraph on what it is you want the money for. So a lot of them don't really say in the first sentence what it is they want to get funded. I mean, it's very hard to write. When you write about it, you're so close to it that you don't think, well, I don't have to tell him it's a dance, because obviously I'm going to do a dance. Or I don't have to tell him it's a series of paintings, because doesn't everyone know? And we kind of forget that the people who are reading the grant application aren't in our heads, and they don't know they're not mind readers. So in that first sentence of that description, you got to say, is it a book? Is it a dance? Is it a series of paintings? Is it a performance? What is it? So that's really the first, the biggest mistake that people make. And I'm sure hearing that, some of you are going, oh, come on, I would never do that. Well, you'd be surprised. So, and I guess the other thing is, if you don't get help, and by that I mean an editor or just someone to kind of bounce ideas off of, it's very easy to forget all the different aspects of your project. So it's really great to have someone else read it and say, oh, you didn't mention the audience aspect of it, or you forgot to mention whatever. So you really need other people, because often it's just, it can be really expanded beyond what your first rough draft says. So, and I guess the other thing is, the third thing is, in terms of big mistakes that are made, it's just not clear what the urgency of the project is. Like, who cares? You got to put down, why is this important? Why do I need the money now and not in 3 years from now? So really claiming an urgency is important, because, you're competing for the grant money with a lot of other people, and some of them did a really good job. So you don't want to be that person that gets thrown in the trash can, either because you made a dumb mistake, or because in the final analysis, another person had a more compelling, urgent reason for the money.
So let's talk about that team that you kind of think is so important to assemble. Editors, other people, but you also talk about in the book, later in the book, you talk about this team that you can create, and it's kind of people, because you're inside your head, it all makes sense to you, but these other people are kind of fresh perspectives, and they can kind of look at it. Can you talk about who are the people that you kind of want to help fill that
Yeah,
spot?
so what I'm talking about in that part of the book is grant writing should not be a solo endeavor. At a minimum, you need somebody to read what you're writing. And if you really don't have anybody, like you're living on a deserted island or something, what you need is time so that you can write a rough draft and then a week later look at it again. I mean, so in a way you can be part of your own team, but what you need to do that is time. So I got to tell you though, when I teach this in New York, all the New Yorkers say, who has all these friends who can help them write grants? Well, I live in Oregon, but I'm from New York. And you'd be amazed at all over the country how artists are teaming up to help each other do stuff like this. So an example is, I find that even as a writer, it's really hard to sit down sometimes and even start to write about what I want. So I need someone to interview me to kind of get me talking and to take notes about what I'm saying. So I'm like, oh yeah, that's it, you know, because you can sometimes forget or just need to kind of ramble for a while to kind of connect to what your vision is. So a brainstormer can be really, really helpful. And the thing is, you can trade with somebody else. So, you know, I mean, you could pay, I mean, I'm an artist coach, so people hire me to sit with them to help them write grants. So you could pay somebody, and you could also trade with somebody, or you can do a combination of both, because it's great to have someone who's super experienced and can save you time and really ask you those questions. And it's also good to have someone else that you can just more ramble with and talk about what your project is. So that team is essential. In terms of the parts of the team, there's the brainstorming person, then there's the editor who really needs to edit your stuff. But there's tons of other examples of who can be on that team. You got to put together a budget for grants so people understand how the money's going to be spent. So even someone to proofread your budget or to help you come up with a list of what your different expenses are going to be and what your potential income is going to be. And the other person that I would mention is someone, when you apply for a grant, you have to do that, describe what you want the money for, you have to submit a budget, and then you also have to submit a work sample. Now, every grant you're going to apply for is going to be different, but that's an example of 3 things you'd have to submit. And for that work sample, it can sometimes be hard to pick the right work sample because it obviously needs to be your best work, but it needs to make sense for the grant. So like if you're applying to paint a mural, let's say, you know, on a side of a building, you're not going to submit, I don't know, your jewelry as an example of your work, because the people are going to say, well, yeah, she makes great earrings, but I can't see how that translates to her wanting to paint a mural. So you got to pick the right work samples. And again, that can be pretty challenging to pick the right work that's also great work, that's well documented. And so those are some examples of the kinds of roles other people can play in your grant writing process.
And you also talk about how if sometimes when you have your work out and you want to do something, sometimes it's good to have people come together and see what's linking it or ask you questions about it and what was the, because that helps in just that writing process of getting exactly what you're trying to uh, write the grant about. Because you even, and we're going to get to it, I'm totally jumping around, but I read in the chat, so and you can't find the live chat. It depends if you're on an iPad for anybody or some sort of mobile device. The chat is below. If you're on an iPad, you probably can't see the chat. Just download the iPhone app, and then you'll be able to see the chat, just so you know. And then I think if I bring stuff on screen, but we're talking about this book today, and mine's all marked up, but that's the way I like to read. So anyway, just kind of trying to help you out over there as well. So, but you talk about that and how sometimes those people help you to, it's kind of like that ideation process. It's in the brainstorming session, but it's sometimes we just don't know where. We're an artist, we want to do something, we would like to do a project, and we would like it to get funded, but we really don't know where to start.
Right, where to start, yes.
So where,
So where to start?
yeah, and I think some people like, Yeah, so where's the first place people should start for somebody who's totally new? What would you suggest? Any
So,
tips?
in terms of where to start, I know this is going to sound like a very odd thing to say, but if you're a real newbie, believe it or not, I would start with funding your own work first and not looking for a grant. Because I actually find a lot of people, and artists and are human beings, like all of us are. And this is the thing. Sometimes grant writing can be a form of procrastination. You get this great idea and you're a little scared to do it. And I have done this before, which is why I know this one so well. And you think, I know, I won't start it yet. What I'm going to first do is write a grant, and that's going to take research and blah, blah, blah. And there's all kinds of benefits of doing that, even if you don't win the money. I talk about that in my book too. But sometimes it's better if you have a great idea to to start to start making it, and then think about funding later or with your next project. I know that's a little bit odd to say, but I've just seen so often, not only in myself but in other artists, they can use grant writing as a way to procrastinate actually getting to the hard work of making art. So that's it. Okay, so and if you feel that it really is time to look for the funding, I advise people to start really in their own studio if they're visual artists, or at their writing desk if they're writers, or on the performance stage if they're performers, and really start to kind of do a look back at all the work they've done before, because there's so many opportunities out there, and what you really want to make sure of is that you are going for the opportunity that makes sense to you at this point and this moment in your career. So another huge mistake that artists make is they see a grant advertised, whatever, 6,000 bucks, 10,000 bucks, 1,000 bucks, whatever, and they think, oh, I just want the money. So they kind of cook up something that will kind of meet the criteria. But let me tell you, those people that review the grants, they can tell if it's a project that you just cooked up or if it's one that really makes sense with the whole trajectory of your career. So having said that, it's just, like I said, really important to just find the right opportunity. Maybe what you really need is a residency because you really want to make a bigger body of work. So apply for residency, because that's almost the same application process as the grant. And sometimes residencies come with money. So in a way, it's an even better grant because it's time, space, and a stipend. So that's really the beginning of really just getting clear on what makes sense for you. Okay, so if you've done that, so that's step 2 at the beginning. Then, in terms of where to start, I would do a couple of things. One is I read artists' resumes and bios wherever I see them. So if I'm sitting in a theater, I read everyone's bio, and everyone always talks about thanks to the Carnegie Mellon, blah, 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 thanks to the Ford Foundation for blah, 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 thanks to whatever. So it's a great way to see who's getting funded by who. And then you can go, oh, let me look up Guggenheim, or let me look up, whatever, and start to, so that's kind of fun and exciting. If you want to get even a little more organized about it, you could check out, and I have all these, I actually have all these resources on my website. So my website is gigirosenberg.com. So,
I'm gonna.
you'll put it up? Okay.
Yep, I'll
If
put it
you,
up.
if you
Yep.
go to the resources page there, you'll see all these live links. The one I'm going to talk about now is the New York Foundation for the Arts. So you'll see it on there, but it's, just so you know, it's nyfa.org. And they have a great database called The Source, and it's such a cool database because you can sort it for, I mean, I can plug in Oregon jazz musician residency, and it's going to tell me what residencies are in Oregon for jazz musicians. That's how detailed it can be. So you can plug in not only what you're looking for, but the kind of art and the kind of support that you want. So that's a great place to start, and a fun place to start. And it's not just for New Yorkers; it's for anyone who wants to look that up. So the Foundation Center can be a great place to go as well. They offer information about grants for individual artists, so you'd want to look for their information about individual artists. So that's the website. Again, that's on my resources page, and their website can be a little daunting because it's got so much information. But they have a main office in New York. They have satellite offices in, let's see, Washington, D.C., in San Francisco, but they also have a website and a lot of smaller offices, like my local library, which is right across the street from my office, has a computer that has their whole database on it that you can access for free. So the Foundation Center is really great as well. You know, you should definitely check your state art agencies. So in Oregon, that's the Oregon Arts Commission. Find out who your state is and find out if they have grants. And then any local places, like in Portland, it's the Regional Arts and Culture Council. So just become a nosy news hound and, you know, looking for opportunities, you know, at all those different places that I just mentioned.
So you talk about, it's funny because in your book you talk about I guess as a kid, you would take brochures and you would read these things as you were traveling, you and your dad.
I do that now. I'm just one of those people that if you put me in a lobby, like at the library, I'll leave with like all the brochures about everything. So just as an example of, you know, I'm just a naturally person who's going to be like, oh, I wonder what's going on over there. Oh, I wonder what this is. Oh, I wonder how that happened. You know, and that's a part of yourself you could foster. That's the part of me that sits and reads the program and looks at movie credits and, you know, just to find out who did that, how did that get done. I'm always fascinated with how people make things happen.
But I think that curiosity, it's like we aren't necessarily curious about those things. So now it's just like fostering that, like really taking, hey, if you have an extra minute and you're just sitting in a lobby, go pick up something and look at it and analyze it, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
To see, right? All right, so why do you think some artists, so you're applying for a grant and maybe they don't get it and they see it as either it wasn't a good project instead of that the writing wasn't good or it wasn't clear, and so they really are using it to either validate themselves as an artist or validate themselves or validate that project. Why do you think that happens and how can we kind of avoid that kind of common mistake?
So I think what you're talking about is what happens really in any setting where an artist asks for something and puts himself in the position of possibly getting rejected. It happens with grants. It happens with a ton of other, you know, asking for a gallery, you know, zillions of other things. And I think sometimes artists make the mistake of when they get, or if they get rejected, and look, you're going to get rejected. You know, last year, just so you know, I applied for 36 opportunities. So this includes, you know, articles I sent out to get published, poems I sent out to get published, grants I applied for, fellowships I applied for. I kept record, 36. Now, this was a bad year for me. I got 2 acceptances. I got 1 poem published, and I got accepted to 1 writer's program I was dying to get into. So I got 1 that I really wanted. So that was, you know, so that's 1 out of 18. But I told that to a salesperson once. That was my kind of average, you know. And she said, wow, you know, if you were in sales, that would be amazingly good. And I thought, oh my God, you're right. You know, we focus on the 34 things we didn't get rather than the 2 we did get, which is nuts. You know, the 34 people aren't interested in us. You know what I mean? So focus on the 2 that are like wanting to be with you. So if you focus on all, you know, if you take the rejection as a statement, you don't know what the rejection is about. First of all, you got to find out why you didn't get the grant, you know, and you know, it could have been the year that nobody liked watercolors on that committee. So don't let those people that don't like watercolors judge your watercolor paintings if, you know, that's what you're doing. So it's, as a grants funder told me once, and she said, don't tell them I said this. It's a crapshoot, you know, you just don't know. But if you don't play the game, your chances are 0. So if you play the game, at least you're getting your chances to be a little better. You know, I write about all this stuff on my blog, and all of you are invited to sign up for my blog. At most, I blog once a week, so you won't be inundated. But sign up for my blog, and you'll get a lot of stuff like this. So it's just gigirosenberg.com/blog. So
I'm putting it up because you sent it to me.
Oh,
so
good.
Somebody told me once, they said, do you think, but I think sometimes we do get rejected so much, but they gave me the example of, you know, when you go to McDonald's and you order, a hamburger and they ask you if you want an apple pie and you say no, have you ever seen them turn away and be like, oh my God, I'm awful at my job. They didn't want an apple pie. They just keep going and they ask the next person because sometimes it's just not the right time for apple pie. So that's what I think, but they're not like crushed because you didn't get their
I have to say,
didn't buy an apple
defense,
pie.
if that person offering the apple pie had grown the apple tree, picked the apples, invented the recipe, made the dough, they might get teary if you didn't want an apple pie. I mean, our work is personal, so of course we're going to take it personally, but the key is it's not to not feel bad about it, it's to feel bad about it and move on anyway. You have to do both, and maybe not both at the same time. I let myself feel bad for a while. I actually work on it so I can get it out of my system and then get back to making work. You just don't want to let it derail you so much that you don't make your work, unless you're looking for an excuse to quit being an artist, and then just quit. Don't torture yourself.
So we have a couple questions. I'm going to pull them on real
Great.
quick. So Nija, maybe is, sorry if I'm messing up your name. Does Gigi have an opinion on the impact that one's residency record has on the grantability of an applicant of funders?
So I think what the question really means is, do I have a better chance of winning a grant if I've done some great residencies? And I'd like to say that anything you do to build your resume can only help you in, winning grants. So yeah, especially if you've won some prestigious residencies, that's fantastic. The other thing I'm going to add to that is advanced grant writing is winning the prestigious residency and then finding a grant that'll pay for all the expenses you're going to have to go to the residency. I mean, just think about it. If you were thinking about funding somebody, who are you going to fund? The person who just wants to do, I don't know, just a residency somewhere they haven't gotten in yet, or the person who's, going to the McDowell colony and is already accepted? I mean, you're going to go with the one who's already accepted and already has that. So anyway, so yeah, the better your resume is, but the thing you have to remember is, and this is something that artists do as well, when we do an application, we want to like shove it all in, shove it all in, shove it all in, tell them everything. Well, if it was a residency that was completely unrelated to the project you're applying for, then it might not make any difference at all, and it could even be a negative to put it on your resume. So, it all depends. It all depends. So I'd say in general, the answer is yes, the better your resume, the better your chances. But I would say probably the resume is the least thing that's considered. I think it's more, I think decisions are more often made on how you've described what you want to do and the past work that you've done that proves you can do it. So I think the resume is fine. And, having a good one is always great, but it's not, I don't believe, going to make it or break it.
So this is kind of, this next one by Spoken Visions Live, which you can write in your real name if you want, Spoken Visions Live, but do you have to be listed as a not-for-profit organization to be approved for a grant? And I think this is one of the misconceptions, I believe. So I definitely want to get into this. So this is not true, is it?
So this is the deal. Let's say, can everyone see my hands? Okay, let's say these are all, let me go this way. Okay, these are all the grants that are out there from this finger to this finger, okay, all these grants. And individual artists are eligible to apply for this many of those grants. So that means, let's say there's 100 grants out there in the world. As individual artists, we are only able to apply for about 10% of those 100 grants out there. Most grants that are out in the world, you have to be a nonprofit organization to apply for them, okay? So all the grants we've been talking about so far today are those 10%, the ones where you're eligible if you are an individual artist. So if you're a nonprofit organization, like Spoken Visions Live is, then that's great, because that means that you can apply, your organization can apply to those other 90 that as a writer I couldn't apply to. So So just keep that in mind. I've been talking mostly today about individual artist grants, but everything I've said today applies to you if you're a nonprofit organization applying for a grant as well. I hope people understand that. And if they didn't, just keep asking me questions. I love answering questions.
So let's talk a little bit about some, because as I was reading the book, I didn't realize I could get a grant for, you got a professional development grant when you needed to get your website up. And, but there are other things that I didn't realize that we could get grants for. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I've had people say, well, I just want to paint. I want to do a body of work, but nobody's going to pay me to do that. But I don't really think that that's true. I think that they can apply for certain grants that will help them. Can you kind of dissolve some of those maybe misconceptions?
Yeah, so I'm covering so much information today, and I just have to say all the details of what I'm talking about are in my book. But there are several different kinds of opportunities that are out there for artists. So there are equipment grants, there are travel grants, there are grants that'll like, for example, if, as I told you before, I'm an artist coach. And some people have found a grant to pay for coming to see me and get coached. So because they made a case that they needed a coach to go where they wanted to go in their career and develop their profession in the way they wanted to develop it. So that was an example of a professional development grant. There are fellowships, which is basically just getting money to do your work. Now, I got to tell you something. Those are extremely competitive, and those are the grants that all of us want. But there's nothing wrong with it. Still should apply, And then there are project grants, and that's when you have an idea for a specific project that you want to do. And, maybe that's a theatrical show you want to put on, or a series of paintings you want to put in and do an installation in some cool building, so that's for a very specific project. So the grants, there aren't, I don't want to give people the idea there are like pots of money sitting out there that, but there are things out there. And I guess the other thing is, what was I going to say? I just forgot what I was going to say. I know what I want to say. I feel, and I talk about this ad nauseum in my book, that the grant writing process really helps you as an artist and as a nonprofit organization, even if you don't win the funding. I mean, I got to tell you, I've even written grants and then decided, you know what, I'm not submitting this because I don't want to do the project that I've just written about. And that was such a gift to me. I wrote about it thoroughly and then realized, wow, I do not want to do this. And I was able to kind of take that project off my dream list. So that was a huge gift of writing the grant. Is I got some, some psychic, I got some psychic space cleaned out. So, anyway.
So we have a couple more questions, so I want to pull those up because I like to get everybody's questions. And so this link is a link to where you can buy her book, which is, I mean, it's not really thick, but it is jam-packed with stuff, and it's really a great resource. And there's a free excerpt. When you go here, you can you can't get a free excerpt any other link that you do, but there you can. Just want to mention that. I'm going to leave that up. So Anne Maver wants to know, should grant proposals for artists address a need?
Okay, so hi, Anne. I know Anne. I'm so happy she's here. Anne's also a great writer. Okay, so should they address a need? So the answer to every question is it depends. And what that question depends on is if the person who's giving the money away sees a need that they want to get met. So if they have a need and your project can meet it, then you're going to have a really good, chance of getting it. So that's why you really need to suss out the place that's giving the money away and find out, well, who have they funded before? What kinds of things do they want to fund? And nowadays, most places that give money away have incredible websites that have their mission statements on it. They have a list of who's been funded before, et cetera, et cetera. So that can be an absolutely great resource for finding out what jazzes them And is it possible that something I want to do jazzes them and they'll want to pay me to do it? So, so anyway, so that's my answer to that.
Okay. And then there was another question from Spoken Visions Live, who they wrote, they are a poet running a operating and spoken word poetry magazine, and they are a not-for-profit. She has volunteers, but she would love to get funded. So that's kind of where her background is, or his
Right.
background. Do you have to be registered as a not-for-profit organization to receive grant funding? I guess for the 90%, you would have to be registered with the as a
you have to be a 501c3, which is the
right.
whatever that is.
Right.
So, or else you'd have to apply as an individual artist. Now, I have to say, we don't have time to go into this today, and also it makes everyone's eyes glaze over. So don't hang up, anyone. I'm just going to talk about this next thing for a minute. There's something called fiscal sponsorship, and you can read about it in detail in my book and many other places too, whereby an individual artist can get sponsored by a nonprofit and then be able to apply for a lot of other types of funding. So it's possible that, for that poetry magazine, that would be a way to do it. So I'm just not, but I would recommend you, I don't know if you read Poets and Writers magazine. They've got a lot of incredible resources in there. And let me think what else. Yeah, but that's what I'm thinking about right now.
So his name is Floyd. So
Great.
I won't call you a her anymore now, because I know. So great, Floyd. I'm glad you're enjoying it. This is what we're here for. So I have some more questions. So how and this isn't on the sheet I gave you, and I always give all my questions, and I'm taking notes all over the side. So anybody who's signed up for my email list, they get the questions the day before. So how do you become a panelist? Because that was one of the things that really kind of opened your eyes to, and one of the impetuses for writing this book. And are the same people on the committees every year? Is that standard, or do they change
we need
up?
to find out, because, for example, if the same people are, I don't think they usually are, but let's just say they are, and you've applied and been rejected, you want to find out, gee, maybe they just don't get my work. But more often, the committees and the curators change year to year, which is great, which means, one year they didn't like watercolors, and the next year, oh my God, that's all they funded was watercolors. You know what I mean? So you've got to find out.
Yeah.
And sometimes what I'll do is, if I can find out, then I'll kind of look up the backgrounds of those people, and I try not to judge. They're definitely not gonna like my work, because I try not to judge, but I try to kind of suss out just the kinds of things they seem to like. But I think more often than not, whoever's judging it tends to change year to year, which is great, because that means if you get rejected, you should ask them, is it worth it for me to apply again? And hopefully you'll get an honest answer about whether it's worth it to apply again, because you may find out that you're just not a good match, and it's a waste of your time, or you've made such a big mistake on your grant application that you've really got to fix that before you apply again. Or you may find out they only funded five things, and yours was number 6. So it's always good to ask that.
So let's talk about that. So let's say you're not awarded a grant. Can we actually contact, and who on that board should we contact to find out why maybe we didn't get it? Or is this like frowned upon?
It will say in your letter sometimes, and the letter I'm referring to is the letter you received that says you didn't get the funding. Sometimes it'll say that, I'm sorry, we don't give feedback, which is understandable, because it can be very disappointing. But the truth is, these arts organizations are so often underfunded and so small that they just don't have time to sit down with all these, kind of disgruntled artists to tell them why they didn't get funded. And if they say we don't give feedback, there's usually nothing you can do. The other thing is if I know the curator changes every year, and I know how stiff the competition is, and I know I made a really great application, sometimes I don't really need to. What are they going to say? I'm sorry, I don't need to get feedback. But if they offer feedback, and sometimes they do, and it could be the kind of thing where they'll say, we don't meet with you in person, but we'll talk to you over the phone, it can be a gold mine of information about why you didn't get funded. So I would definitely do that, but I would not pursue it if they say clearly we don't give feedback, which probably half of them will, I would guess.
So have you learned anything? I know you talk about something that you learned in the book, so that's kind of what the prompt is. Have you learned anything from not getting a grant that you were awarded, and how did you handle the rejection? And do you continue on with the project, or do you just let the project go sometimes?
Sometimes I've let it go, and sometimes that's been a mistake to let it go. I realized years later that it was really something I wanted to do that I kind of let die an early death. And other times the rejection just keeps me continuing to work on it, continuing to hone it, and continuing to it's sort of like, it's one of those situations where you kind of do your own recommitment ceremony, and sometimes after that recommitment, it's your commitment is even stronger than it was before, which can be great. So I think, again, it just kind of depends. And sometimes, a couple times I've been like, oh, thank God I didn't get that, because this was the wrong year for that thing to happen. So it's really mixed. And in terms of how to handle the rejection, like I said, I do let myself feel sorry about it, but I have to say, the more I apply for things, the more I get rejected. The rejections get less, just less, they stop me a lot less now than they used to. But I think part of the great thing about getting older is that you, hopefully anyway, you have less things you let get in your way. So.
Right. So, how did you get asked to be a
Oh, right, you asked
panelist
that. Yeah.
on a grant committee?
So, I can't really remember exactly. I think they called me. So there's a few lessons in that. One is they can't call me if they don't know me. So I was getting known at this place because I was applying for grants, and I don't know, showing up to parties and who knows what else. But the other thing is, it was a great experience sitting on a panel and judging grants. I learned so much, and it was fun. It was a ton of work. I mean, you don't get paid; it's volunteer. So,
Yeah.
and you have to go through, this, like, where are my hands here? This stack, much higher than my hands are right here. This huge stack of applications, and you see how, God, when you're sitting there looking at the stack, all you want to do is throw some in the trash can, and you're just trying to look at those applications and think, how can I throw this one in the trash can? I mean, it's a horrible thing to say, but when you have to get the stack down, you look for anything. I mean, you won't make things up, but if there are really some big bloopers, you're not going to, for example, you're not going to call somebody and say, oh, gee, the link you gave us didn't work, or the CD you gave us was blank. I mean, you're just going to be like, okay, next. So, but anyway,
Right.
you could, if sitting on a panel is something you feel like you want to do, and again, don't do it as a way to procrastinate unless you need a break. It can be really fun to do. And also, as artists, we spend so much time working alone that it could be a really fun thing to do in a group of other artists. It could be a social thing and also a way to have, meet colleagues and stuff. So you could ask organizations if they are looking for panelists. I mean, you have to be at a level in your career where, you'd be considered a peer of the applicants, but, you never know. So anyway, I think it's a great thing to do. I think we just got a question.
So, okay, yeah. Can Gigi share any tips or pointers on how to figure out a budget for an intended project? Because you do in the grant writing application, you have to. It's a lot of things, and every grant's going to be different, and the requirements are going to be different. But you always have to do a budget. So, can you give us some pointers, and then especially for artists that aren't so great at numbers? And I'm right there with you, Marta.
So, what I would do is I would definitely get help with the budget from a friend who's not afraid of numbers and is pretty good with numbers. And The biggest thing to make sure of is that you just make sure you include every possible expense that you might have. And that's down to the stamps you're going to use to stick on the invitations, to your event or whatever. And then also sit down and brainstorm all the possible ways you're going to make money. Because, the other thing is the granting organization, they don't like to be the only place that gives you money. They want to see you've got access to other funds as well. So what are all the ways that you can make some income? And that's really good for you to do as an artist too, is not just put all your wishes on this one grant, but have other ways of making income so that you're really expanding your horizons, So those are kind of the really big pointers and tips about that. And I guess the other thing about starting out with grant writing, I would start really small, an easy application at a local place where you have a better chance of getting help from the organization and also a better chance of possibly winning the grant. But it's nice. I'm the kind of person where I like to kind of chunk something down, so it's baby steps. I'm not gonna, my first time out might not be a National Endowment for the Arts grant, unless I am extremely advanced but have done hardly any grant writing. And I'd say if your work and your career is up to that level, then go for it. I have a friend who's a very accomplished poet. I mean, she just won the National Book Award. But a few years ago, I think the first grant she applied for was the NEA. Now, she was obviously late in coming to the game, but and she won the grant. So you got to just kind of suss out. But I think in general, for the humans among us, it's good to start small.
Cool. All right. So, what are some other common misconceptions about grants, and where else could somebody get funding? What are some other types of donations that artists could seek out, like the individuals and the in-kind donations? You've told us about the links that are on your website, but what about for individuals or the in-kind? So if somebody doesn't know what that is, could you?
Yeah, what Diane is referring to is in terms of other places you can look for money and donations. Now crowdfunding is a really big deal. When I wrote the grant writing book, it wasn't something that really everybody was doing, but you could see if you could put together, and you have to have the right project and really have the right personality. But if you do, going to a place like Kickstarter or all the other places, like Kickstarter, and putting together a campaign to raise money can be a great thing to do. And that's when I was talking before about all the other income you could show on your grant application and your budget. Doing that kind of individual fundraising can be great to add that to your income on the budget. And the other thing you shouldn't forget about is getting donations. I mean, if someone's going to be bringing food to your opening, like a deli is donating, food for the opening or whatever, or the printer is donating printing for the postcards that you're mailing out, that's a great example of in-kind donations, and that means a ton when you put that on a budget. It shows how your community is really coming together and supporting your art, which can be extremely compelling for the funders.
And what's great, just so you know, Marta, chapter 9 is about budgeting, and she has all kinds of, I mean, it's not just words. She kind of shows some examples, and then exactly what we're talking about right now is chapter 11. Now, granted, this came out in 2010, so she didn't, like she said, the Kickstarter stuff, but like Peter, who's down here, he just had a successful Kickstarter for Design versus Cancer, and I hope you guys, we shared it a bunch on the past couple weeks on Design Recharge, and I know that, but that's really, it is nice to know that it was successfully funded, but we've also had people on who tried once and it didn't get funded, and then they tried again, and they, tweaked their, just like you would on a grant writing application, you are going to tweak it so that you're going to do something different. Yeah, Peter says it's like a second job, and it is the same way with grant writing, but the video is really important, all the stuff that comes out there, because and it's just like that beginning paragraph, I would think, Gigi, that would kind of be a really important in the beginning to say what you're going to have. But if somebody's going to say, hey, I'm going to fund half already, and then I'm going to do this. I'm already putting, $5,000 into this. If you could give me $5,000, I would be able to do it quicker. Or does that sound better, especially like the urgency, or does that help or not?
I'm a little confused by what your question is. The urgency?
Say I
What is,
So you said urgency was sometimes
right, right.
important. So if somebody was saying, I'm going to do this, I have this
Uh-huh.
project, I could do it quicker
Oh,
if you give me the other $5,000.
right,
But
right.
if not, I'm going to put my 5,000 and I'm just going to keep going, but it'll take me another 2 years to raise another $5,000 for this project.
Right.
Does that come into play at
Yeah,
all in the
that's
urgency
kind of an
section, or?
urgency, but I think you need to explain, so what you have to wait 2 years, why that matters. So maybe there's some, and I'm just kind of making this up, but urgency can be some, maybe there's some social commentary aspect of what you're doing that's kind of news now, but it's not going to be news 5 years from now. So that would kind of be an example of some kind of urgency. Or maybe you want to do interviews with people who are, 90 years old. You can't wait 5 years for that, so it just kind of depends. There can be all different kinds of, of urgency. One thing I just wanted to mention is next week on January 30th, I'm actually going to be doing a webinar for Creative Capital, which is, I want to mention this for a couple of reasons. One is Creative Capital is such a great organization. They're based in New York, and they've just got tons of information on their website about they offer grants to artists, but they also have just tons of other information, and they have a great webinar series. So next Thursday, January 30th, and the link is on the homepage of my website, I'm going to be doing a webinar on grant writing for artists. So it won't be like today, which is a lot of Q&A, but I'll be leading you through from the very beginning through to the end on all these little details. So, today's kind of been the smorgasbord and having a lot of nibbles of, a lot of different things. And, if you want to get more into the kind of my going through it more, well, like it's a webinar, it's a class. I think it's only an hour. Anyway, look, and it's next
Is
Thursday,
it the
and you can tune in from anywhere.
is Where is it on your
So
website?
just
Is
go
it
to
the
my
Claim Your Vision?
no, go to
No?
my
Oh, here it
yeah,
is. Register. Here it
yeah.
is. Yeah, I'm there. I'm going to
Oh, great.
share the
Okay.
link
Yeah,
right
that'd be
now
great. Because I
so that people
realize that
can.
there's just so much information, but that will be a class, and it should be really fun too. Well, but it'll just be a little more um, regimented than an interview. So good.
Cool. Okay. All right. So we have a few more questions I want to make sure we get through.
Great.
Um, all right. So let's see. What about the energy? You talk about this a lot in the book, the energy and the tone. Um, the excitement, getting that out. What's a good way to go about? Because a lot of times artists aren't the great, or we don't necessarily think of ourselves as great writers. That's why we're visual artists. So can you help us with that a little bit?
So, first of all, you need to be excited about the project yourself, so it comes from a real authentic place of excitement. And if you're not, you need to think about why. Sometimes you're so scared that you're going to get the funding, that might be why, and other times you realize you're not that interested in it. So then I think what you really need to do, if you're not a writer, then sit down with a writer and look at your verbs, okay? What verbs can you use that aren't the tired, got, put, can, should, just the other thing is take out all the conditional verbs from your stuff. The project might do blah blah blah. Don't say it might do something. Say it will do something. You want to write it as if your project already exists. Like it's already there. That's really the key. So somebody like Anne Maver, who's an amazing artist, she's lucky. She's also a writer. But if you're not lucky like Anne, then sit down with a writer friend, and that's one of the writer tricks is looking at verbs and making them more active and more just more exciting than the usual kind of tired old things. I have a funny quote in my book. what somebody said, nobody wants an artist who's hoping and trying to do something. You know what I mean? So you don't want to say you're hoping this or trying to do that. You either want to do it or not. So.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of times there's other, and we kind of talked about this, but I've applied for things, I work at a university, so I've applied for things within the university, but then I've also, organizations that I belong to, they also give funding, like an artist, they give residencies as well as just funding for certain things. And I think that was when I go back and look at them, I think I hoped a lot in my or I was trying. And I think that that's a really good way to think about it. It's like, no matter what, I'm going to do this. And it's about doing it. So I think that's a great tip. All right. So Floyd says, great show. Thanks so much. So yes, she's awesome. So I'm really glad to have you. So he's just excited as well.
Good.
So Alma says, using action verbs, right, as if the project is already happening, and communicate that it's a good and worthy project.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
It's funny. You have to run this line. You don't want to be shy and you don't want to be obnoxious, So most people err on the side of being too shy. But I've read some applications where they're on the side of obnoxious. So you just got to walk that line.
And I think that's where that team can come into play and help you decide, hey, this sounds too cocky, or you're not sounding confident enough. I think that that's where you've got to have somebody who's also invested in you as a friend or another artist who wants to see you succeed. So one thing I love about your book is at the end of every chapter, there are your assignment
Diane,
that you're giving us, which isn't super long, so it's not like, oh crap, here's more homework.
Type it in.
But then you also, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I can't hear you. I think somebody better type it in for me so I can answer this question.
Oh, sure. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, yeah. I'm not sure what happened.
Okay.
Oh, you're gone again.
One thing I love about your book is that at the end, I don't know either, but at the end of every chapter you have, so it's your assignment and then your cheat sheet.
Yeah, I can't.
Can you talk about that?
It's just totally broken up. Can someone help me by typing something in? Oh, I see something. I can't even see what you're pointing to. Oh, what Diane is saying is at the end of every chapter, there's a cheat sheet. Yes, at the end of every chapter, there's a cheat sheet and an assignment. I'm somebody who really loves to, I feel like so much can be accomplished by doing and act, rather than just kind of, anyway, just taking action. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. So, and also what I like to do when I read a book is kind of have a little summary at the end of the chapter. Because even though I may reread the chapter several times, it's kind of a really nice refresher. So.
All right. Can you hear me now?
I just want to, can people hear? Because I can't hear anything. Oh, good, you can hear me both. All right, so before everybody hangs up, because I know our time is getting limited, I just want to say, if you'd like more of this stuff, then please sign up for my mailing list. You can find the sign up on actually every page of my website. And like I said, I do a weekly or sometimes twice a month blog. It's about so much of the stuff that artists and writers and performers kind of come up with. So I would love to, be in touch with you. And it's really fun when I've met people in this way to then have them comment on stuff. So it would be great to stay in touch. Does anyone, how much time do we have, Diane? Do we have time for any other questions? Oh, yeah, you also can sign up for my Facebook page as well. I just want to say that I do post on the Facebook page. When I hear about a really cool grant, I'll post that. And so I just find that it's a nice way to just continue. I like to be signed up with a few things. So if I miss it on Twitter, I'll find it on Facebook. So, and a nice reminder just to keep pursuing this part of your art life.
And also sign up for her blog, which is filled with tons of great information. And then if you just need the link to her book, you can definitely get it off of this link right here. And just her website is gigirosenberg.com, which is the beginning part of this. And I just want to, I don't know if you can hear me, but I just want to say thank you.
You're welcome. This is really fun.
Okay. I was definitely going to write it in. So thank you so much. You guys make sure you sign up. There's tons of information, and there's stuff that I didn't realize that I could write a grant for in this book. So I definitely would pick this up. I mean, I make a lot of notes, and it was really fast to read. So, and I'm a slow reader. So it's a great book. So you should get it. And then Gigi, thank you so much. I'm gonna stick up a couple other things. We also have I have stuff every week. It's mainly for designers, but if any artists, illustrators, things like that. So you can always sign up for my newsletter, and you'll get a reminder email, and you'll kind of get a figure out who's going to be on next week, things like that. And we're talking about personal branding next week with the creative group. And that's here, so you can sign up here. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. All of them are down there. And then you can always also have another newsletter thing that's a little bit longer with some business tips every week, and you can sign up for that there. And I just want to thank you guys so much. And Gigi, thank you so much. And I hope to have you back on because there was so many questions. And I think I'm gonna do the thing next week as well. So the webinar. Thanks for sharing that with us. And if you missed anything, it's in the chat, and you can watch this at this link anytime. So, Gigi, thank you so much, and I will see you guys next week.
Okay, bye,
and I hope y'all have a great week, and I'll see you then. Thanks so much again, Gigi.
Bye.
Bye, guys.